All right, we are live.
Awesome. What's up, guys? Shawn Bowen, Full Circle Investment Group and wholesalingoutofthebox.com. Back in here for another lunchtime live. And as the title says, today we are discussing contracts and paperwork and the ultimate what has to happen in order to do these deals and make money, right? So, guys, as you guys are coming on, if you would, please click on the link. If you come on live and you can join us, hit that StreamYard. That way it'll allow us to see who you are and where you're from, and we can add you in the comments here. So today we are talking about paperwork that's involved with doing wholesaling. And this is the disclaimer. I'm not an attorney. I can't give you legal advice. With that said, we've been doing this industry for 10 years, and we have done multiple different types of paperwork. But the most basics are purchase and sale agreement and a assignment of contract. And those are the most two important documents that you're going to need when getting into wholesaling. So recommendation one would be get with a local attorney. A lot of stuff is available online these days, guys, and that's great. But do you understand what you're using? Do you understand the legalities behind it? And YouTube University can only keep you out of trouble, but so much, right? So the idea here is to understand what you're filling out when you're sending over a purchase and sale agreement, and understanding where things go and where on the paperwork or the contract, right? So deep diving into this is obviously having the seller's name in the right spot, the legal description, the tax ID, and then going through specifics on your contract, which is, what does it take? What's the timeline for closing? What is your EMD amount? Where is the EMD kept? In your contract, what does it say on as far as you have a review time, right? You have to have an ability to either close on this contract because everything makes sense, and or you can't because maybe you get into it, your rehab budget is not what you thought it was. Your end buyers are not agreeable to the number that you said that you could get it sold for. There's a lot of different variables in there, right? So people are calling those out contracts or out clauses, right? So you can get out of that contract. If you are doing your legwork up front, you should be able to control these contracts and have them sold if you're sticking to your numbers, okay? But back to the basics of this. Understanding in your local area and what state you're in and what city you're in, and getting with an investor-friendly attorney so that they can give you the guidance on that paperwork. When we first started, I had an attorney here that was in Hampton Roads that was recommended me by another investor, and they gave us the paperwork, right, in return for a fee on our first closing. And I think it was like $150. And we paid it on the HUD when we did our first deal. Now, that deal didn't go through for quite some time. I was going to say like 5 or 6 months before I did my first deal. But we paid it. And that attorney was very helpful, right? Very, very helpful. Emails, calls, pick up the phone when we needed it, and they would be there to help us. So this is really important. Build that relationship with your attorney or a investor-friendly attorney, and get the guidance of how to fill this paperwork out so that you are understanding what you are and are not legally responsible for, what you're telling the seller you're going to do. And now let's talk about the buy side, right? For the buyer side of this, you need to be very, very aware of what you're doing when you're selling that paper and you're in buyer, right? They should have already gone through the vetting process. They should have already gone through whether they can or can't close. And you guys should have had the discussion up front about what your EMD is, how that gets deposited at your attorney's office to give you what your company requires as a ratified contract. And then what terms are on it, right? Do they have the ability to inspect the home? Have they already inspected the home and there are no contingencies, meaning that they're not worried about anything? They've gotten through their due diligence period prior to contracting up with you and they're comfortable, right? And then what does that paperwork read like? What happens if they don't close on time? I mean, in ours, we have one that has a contract delay. If there's a closing delay, they're responsible for a $200 a day per diem penalty. So for every day that they're late, it costs them money, right? This is to keep people's feet to the fire, make them move, and make them get the transaction done as quick as possible. When you're dealing with true buyers, you don't run into that problem, right? And you start building that rapport with them. So going back from the beginning of purchase and sale agreement to assignment of contract, that's very important stuff, right? Very, very important stuff. So I'm going to come back to the purchase and sale agreement in a second, but on assignments of contract, having the ability to control the contract means that you stay in control of the entire closing. So, for example, the closing needs to stay at your attorney's office. Your attorney takes care of title, and your attorney does all closing coordination that it takes with the buyer. Unless they're so adamant, most people don't care. They're willing to close at your attorney's office if they know the fees. So again, being transparent with your buyers up front and being transparent with what your paperwork says so that everybody's in the know and there's no surprises. Okay. And I'm going to go back over to purchase and sale agreement. Same thing goes with the purchase and sale agreement, is that you're being very transparent with your sellers on all of the paperwork and what happens, how it works, and explain to them what your process is so that there is no surprises. So tell them that you're going through an inspection period. Tell them that the EMD will be held at the attorney's office. Explain to them the paperwork line for line, right? This is what you need to do to get comfortable with sellers that are, maybe you're making a lower offer than the other guy, but what makes it solid, right? For us, we will send over a proof of funds to show that we are the company that can close, and we do have that ability. If you don't have that, it is what it is. But if you do, that's your one up to some of the other guys that aren't playing that role or doing what they should be because they're over promising and under delivering, right? Maybe there is no Mayo formula that they're formulating and they're not putting together to come up with a real number, right? The problem with that is that they've now gone to a seller, committed. Let's just say the number they gave him was $100,000 and the number shouldn't have been more than 70. So now this seller feels as though they've got this number. It's going to happen. And guys, keep in mind, sellers in their lifetime, most sellers, most homeowners are dealing with maybe 3 to 4 properties in their lifetime that they're going to own. So they're not in the day-to-days. They don't understand as detailed as we do, right? So this is something that you need to take the time to explain to your seller about how this transaction is going to go down. So that what happens if you have to come back and ask for a reduction for whatever reason, right? It could be problems with the property as far as like termite inspections. There could be issues with foundation issues. I mean, there could be an inspection issue of checking the property out that could cause you to have to go back and negotiate that sale lower. And if you didn't build that rapport and transparency in the beginning, you're probably not going to get that reduction, right? So this is the difference between understanding your paperwork and putting out the correct paperwork to your sellers and your buyers so that everybody is very comfortable with the transaction and understands exactly in detail where things are going. And then back over to the assignment of contract. This is being very diligent and very detailed in what you're doing, right? Because if you're not, and let's say down to the 11th hour and it's time to close, and let's say that the buyer's funding source pulls out, is that EMD that's retained by your attorney? Do you have to go fight for it? What does your paperwork say about you keeping it? How does that work, right? I know there's a lot of guys out here talking about getting EMDs up front. And I don't feel as though that's the best way to do it. I feel as though that this is one of those scenarios where you want the money to sit in the account at escrow at the attorney's office. Because if something comes back on title that you can't control and you've taken let's just say it's a $5,000 fee and you've got the $5,000, either you've spent the $5,000 or you don't have the $5,000 and now it's time to give it back. That's a bad situation and a really tough one to deal with, right? So you need to keep that money at the attorney's office and then be very strict on the fact of how it closes and if they default and then what's the next steps. Okay. So purchase and sale agreements, assignment of contract, getting with local attorneys to help you with this paperwork, to get very familiar with it. right? And get down in the weeds and understand exactly what it is and how you're filling it out, so that, especially for guys that are new, you are defined in what you're doing, so that you're not, what if you didn't have the correct tax ID number, or you didn't have the correct seller's name on it? You could possibly not have a legal binding contract. So keep that in mind when you're talking to these attorneys, and just take the time to put in the effort to understand what you're doing. I mean, this is real estate, and these are contracts, and they're meant to take care and protect both sides of the problem, or both sides of the equation, so that you understand who can do what and how and why. Okay. So hopefully this talk today was good. This lunchtime is going to be a little bit shorter because it's just on paperwork. As short as this talk is, goes a lot deeper with details, right? So get with that local attorney, get with a local investor. If you're local here to Hampton Roads, get with us and we'll point you in the right direction, and get you with those attorneys. No, we do not give our paperwork out. And no, we do not, like, we'll talk to you about it. But at the end of the day, again, this is all advice and for learning experiences, right? This is not legal representation or legal advice. This is me telling you, go to the attorney and get that advice, because those are the people that will help you the best. And that's what we did in the beginning. So guys, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you. If you come back and you're watching this replay, please leave some information some feedback on this. What happened in your first experience of dealing with a purchase and sale or an assignment? What are some of the good stories and what are some of the horror stories, right? Because everybody's got them. And then share with us in the group how this is either helpful or wasn't, or how you might recommend to do things for the other people in the group that are either new, or just trying to get into it, or just don't know where to go, right? That's what this group is for, and that's what these lunchtime lives are for. So hopefully this is helpful. Again, thank you for taking the time to be with us, and we'll see you on the next one. Later.